of a different place than it was a while back. I wanted to cover a couple logistics real quickly. I am going to be covering chat here. I do have my slides on one screen, and on the other one I am following the Teams meeting itself. So if you have a couple questions, you want to pop in, feel free to add a question into the chat here. And Lee, can you confirm to me, is this a 45-minute session?
It's 40 minutes, 40 to 50 minutes.
40, got it, perfect. Yeah. All right, I can definitely do that. All right, so let's get started directly into this. First off, I want to talk about just meetings in general and then into online meetings. Meetings are not a natural thing, and when you think about it, bringing people together to kind of make a decision, come to consensus, I think we can think about it in real life examples. It's harder and harder, but it's just not something that we do naturally. And I think a lot of us have been dragged into the online experience, kicking and screaming more so than we would have been in the past, and that we need to really consider what is important when we are meeting together, and it actually really should place a threshold in front of us before we are going to force people into an online meeting situation, so we're not wasting their time and that we are actually doing something productive. I think since COVID has started and most people have been, knowledge workers at least, have been working from home, or at least working from home more frequently, there is people are more apt to set up an online meeting, which makes things seem more official and more needing to happen. And there's significantly less of the walk by, pass by, hey, anybody got, do you have 5 minutes to talk real quick? And that really has a huge impact, because when you think about it, the sort of increase in use of Microsoft Teams was pretty linear at first. And then March 2020 happened, and beyond that, it has just been a complete explosion within the uses of Microsoft Teams. Now, as far as I'm aware, Microsoft actually has only released data into April or May of 2020. I'm actually kind of curious to see if they've plateaued because they pulled everybody in kicking and screaming, or if they continue to grow. Now, here in the United States, the school season has just started in the last month or so, and I know a lot of schools have moved off of Zoom because of security concerns, which Teams is sort of the base place for those places to all end up. But that is a lot of people to now end up into this sort of online, learning space, working space, whatever. And it's not just the 75 million people; it's 5 billion meeting minutes per day was reported. I think it was at Ignite. That Microsoft reported that number, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. That is a lot of meeting minutes going on per day. And it's not just that, it's a lot of bad potential behavior, because so many of these people were being dragged into this experience kicking and screaming, not necessarily aware of what they should be doing or how they should have their let's say their room just set up, their lighting set up, to make things a better experience for everybody else in the organization and moving forward that way. And I think a lot of these you can probably relate to. We've seen, plenty of views up people's nostrils that I don't care to see. And I think the one that sort of hits the news most likely at these points now is the toilet flushes in the background. People feel like they can kind of take their device into the bathroom and get away with it. And it's not just that one Zoom person that brought it into brought their laptop into the toilet and had the video on. Believe it or not, the Supreme Court of the U.S. had an issue where they moved to the 1980s this year, and they did their debates on teleconference. Well, during one of the final words during one of the sessions a couple months ago, there was actually a toilet flush in the background. Nobody knows from who or why, which is funny because there were so many issues of people being on mute and having to unmute themselves. So it is something that hits everybody, which means that we have to kind of walk into this thinking strategically about how we're going to do our work and how we're going to have our meetings, because when we have just a general meeting in person in a room, you don't really have to think about it as much, especially if you're just attending or providing input. For the facilitator, on the other hand, you do have to do some, thought process here and there. But really the kind of takeaway here is the poor etiquette and just behavior and not being prepared is very, very common, and it is now blossomed into being overly common within the workforce, both on the knowledge worker side, in the enterprise, in schools, all over the place. And this sort of led me to put together an online guide for meetings within Microsoft Teams. This is a free ebook that I worked on with a Microsoft partner named AvePoint. If you haven't heard of them before, now you have. And special thanks to Sven Seidenberg, who helped me with the peer review of this. This is free and available to you if you want to go get it. You can actually add it as a tab in your Teams channel if you want to, so that people can kind of look at it and use it as a basis for how they should be running their meetings. But this is sort of where I wanted to get a nice centralized view as to what a good meeting should be within Microsoft Teams. And that's really what brings us here today. So my name is Matt Wade. I'm a Microsoft MVP, which means I don't work for Microsoft. And the question I just got was, could you put that link in the chat? Every single slide will actually be available at the very end of the session. So all of the links that are in the slides will be available to you afterwards. So don't worry about the content not being available. You'll definitely have it all for you. My name is Matt Wade. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I do not work for Microsoft. I'm a consultant and trainer based out of upstate New York, a couple hours north of New York City. I think if anybody knows me for anything, it's probably my infographics, specifically the periodic table of Office 365, but I do a lot of blogging, video making, things like that. And I talk a lot about Microsoft 365, Office 365, and I really push hard on the Microsoft Teams experience. I've been pushing hard on meetings as of late because so many of us are sort of stuck into this in a way that we haven't been in the past. But I'm not here really to talk about O365 in general. I want to talk specifically about Teams meetings. So this is sort of broken up into the same chapter format the ebook is that I referenced a little bit earlier. So the first chapter I want to cover here is general tips. And this is just sort of big picture things that you want to make sure that you do within Microsoft Teams. And this whole overview is sort of a crash course on the life cycle of an online meeting in Microsoft Teams and how you can do it well. A quick caveat, this is just one man's opinion, right? This is just Matt Wade's view on this with some peer review here and there, but take this as sort of a starting point, as inspiration, not necessarily prescription, and run with it that way. So the first thing I want to say is download the Teams apps to your phone, to your desktop, because you're going to get a better experience in the desktop app than you will from the browser experience, and that's especially applicable with the meetings experience. Sharing video, things like that, don't necessarily work as well, or at all for that matter, in the browser experience. That being said, if you are inviting somebody from the outside to a meeting, it's really great that they can just join in from a browser and not have to download any plugins, okay? So I think that's a really big deal. Another really cool one, if you're not aware of it, is to check out this test call feature within the search box in Teams. I don't know if you've ever heard of slash commands, but if you type slash and then a couple letters, you'll start bringing up commands where you can kind of run things as a shortcut. And test call will actually run a test on your microphone, speakers, and video. So before you get into a meeting at all, you can actually test your hardware without having to call somebody else to do it. So it's a nice way to keep things in mind on your end. And a pair of headphones will go a long way. I know I say that not wearing headphones. I've specifically set up my office here so that I don't have to have those big-eared headphones on my head all the time. I don't like the feeling of the pressure, but I do wear earbuds on a frequent basis when I'm around. So headphones really do help out because they keep the sound a little bit clearer. Bluetooth or wired, your choice, but definitely invest in a pair of headphones, especially if you're going to be on the go. If you have sort of a stable office environment, a microphone and speakers work perfectly well. I know that that's going to annoy a lot of the Teams noise and sound and unified communications people within this conference itself, but Teams actually does an excellent job of blocking out any sort of reverberation as long as you don't put the things right next to each other, right? Also in Teams, when you have a team, it comes with a lot of stuff, which means you have access to file storage, note-taking, forms, video portal, a whole bunch of different things. Make sure to try to use those things. They're not just there for fun. You can have a lot of productive use of these and definitely take advantage of them when you can. So this kind of brings me into the overall concept of a meeting. One of the most useful sessions I've ever taken for like a professional development in a course, for a past employer was a meeting facilitator course. If you run a lot of meetings, you really should take one of those courses. It is not something, as I've said earlier, meetings are not something that are natural to humans. Socializing and social ability is, but being organized and running a meeting effectively is not. There are a lot of tricks to the trade for this, and running a good meeting in Microsoft Teams requires you to be able to run a good meeting, period. So some of the base tips that you want to make sure that you can cover here is to absolutely have an agenda and share it ahead of time. There should be no surprises as to what you're going to be covering during that meeting. You want to make sure you define the success so everybody in the room understands what the outcome should be. Whenever people come into the room expecting different outcomes or hoping for different outcomes as being their own definition of success, some people will definitely leave considering that meeting to be a waste of time and being unhappy with it. So if expectations are set from the very beginning, there'll be less frustration coming out from that. And then invite the right people. If you don't invite the key people to make sure that if you don't invite the right people or key stakeholders, you just wasted everybody's time because you can't make a decision. And if you're inviting a whole slew of people and CCing an entire department just because, that's wasting a bunch of people's time as well. So be strategic when you go forward and you want to invite people. And then make sure you're sharing the resources and information ahead of time. At this point, it's 2020. Even if you weren't using Teams, you should not be attaching files to an invitation to a meeting. You should absolutely be sending a link so that those people can click that link and open it. And anytime they open, let's say a link to a folder in OneDrive, or maybe it's just a file, just the agenda, a Word doc or something, every time they open it, it is the most up-to-date version available. Otherwise, you're sending out updates to the appointment, which is just annoying, especially if the meeting has a lot of people. So have a folder or a dedicated folder for all of the content that you're going to share. That's not just the agenda, that's all of the presentations, that's all of the dashboards, that's all of the Excel spreadsheets or anything else that you're going to be sharing. So make sure that that stuff is available to people ahead of time. And then make sure you stay on topic. Have a parking lot for relevant topics that come up, but say, nope, sorry, that's not on the agenda. We're going to push it off here and we'll keep that for the next meeting. Have a timekeeper so that each topic has a specific amount of time that they are given for this, and make sure that that person, or try to give that person the rights to manage the lobby or mute people. Basically the logistics that a facilitator doesn't have time or the brain power to try to manage. And that's something like, say for this session right now, everybody's on mute. Actually, I think we probably put the hard mute on, but being able to keep the distractions at a minimum, keeping the presenter from having to think too hard about something that they shouldn't have to, is a really big thing. Then you want to make sure you assign a scribe. Somebody needs to be taking notes. There needs to be some sort of record. Yes, you can record the meeting. Yes, you can get transcripts. A transcript is not minutes. Minutes are not notes. You want something at least, brief that people can just read when they need to without spending a crap ton of time on it. And at the very end, probably the most important part of this is tasks. Assign your tasks. Who and when are the most important aspects of this. Do not let tasks just mingle or say, oh, yeah, we're going to go do that. Make sure to write it down. Make sure the next time you meet that you absolutely bring together that the updates on those things. And at this stage, I would also schedule any sort of future regroup meetings, because getting people together and scheduling a meeting is much easier in person than elsewhere. All right, so before you can even have a meeting or schedule a meeting, you have to find the right time. This might seem super simple, and yes, the first option here is going to be using the scheduling assistant, which we've been using in Outlook for probably decades now. The experience in Teams is similar and very, very nice. This is great when you're doing internal meetings. You try to find a time when somebody's available and then, avoid any sort of conflict. But in the real world, that's not how it works. You want to try to connect with people outside. You're not going to be able to see their calendars. If you haven't tried this out yet, install the Find Time plugin to your Outlook. I use Outlook on the web mostly because I think that the user experience is better. So there's a few references to Outlook in this session. All those screenshots are from Outlook on the web because frankly, it's always being updated and the feature set is just wildly better, I think. But try out Find Time. It's from Microsoft. It's free. It's just like doodle.com if you've ever used that. And basically it sends out a poll to all the people, giving them choices of times to pick. And whichever time is available for all of them, or that are shown preference by the respondents, you could actually have the system automatically schedule a meeting for you, and it'll actually hold all the time slots for you. Now, not for the other people, so time is of the essence for them to get a response in, but it's very, very useful. Another option is Cortana. You can actually use Microsoft's AI tool to say, in an email, hey, Cortana, go schedule a meeting with XYZ people, send a Teams meeting, all that kind of stuff. This one requires you to have your setup a little bit better, so it knows what your hours are, so that it doesn't schedule outside of your hours, which can be a little bit less flexible. So like I'm in the US, and if I want to schedule a meeting with people in Europe, which happens regularly, you know, I'm generally only going to meet with them in the morning, their afternoon. So I'm going to make exceptions where I might get up at 5 in the morning early to meet with those folks, and they might stay late. So the AI sometimes follows the rules a little too good, but you have some options there. But this is a really good way to get those meetings scheduled. Now, when it comes to which type of meeting you want to use, there's actually 4 different types of meetings in Teams. We'll cover some bases here on all 4. The first one is just the standard meeting, schedule a meeting, one that we've been using probably for decades now through Outlook or through Skype. But then Teams introduced the concept of a channel meeting. Channel meeting is something that exists just within a channel, so it's team-based, it's permission-based, and all of the artifacts of that meeting exist within that channel. So files that are shared, the conversation, all that stuff is there. You can also do a meet now or a call, which are effectively the same thing, just with different names and a different context, depending on what you're using. Generally, I look at this as sort of the, calling somebody from an ongoing chat within Teams. And then there's live events, which most of us probably haven't used yet. Well, actually, I guess in this population that may not be completely true. But a live event is the other option if you click the drop-down arrow next to new meeting. And this is more for town halls and webinars, where you can have up to, I think, 20,000 or more people now and a few presenters. There is no chat. There is no video coming from the attendees. It's really just coming from a few presenters to very, very many people in the outside. So you kind of have to think about what type of meeting you want to have before you even press go on the meeting itself. So once you decide on your meeting, that's when you want to get going, right? So to start an ad hoc meeting or a meet now meeting or a call, I generally go through the ongoing chat, but you can hover over somebody's contact card and press call. You can use the meet now within the channel, which is a channel meeting, but a meet now version of that. So you can definitely do that. To schedule a meeting, you can go into your calendar app on the app bar in Microsoft Teams, and you can click new meeting and schedule. And there's that live event button if you've never seen that or never had to play around there. You can schedule a meeting in Outlook. Now, again, this is from Outlook on the web. If you click a new meeting or a new event and show details, there's actually an option for Teams meeting. Depending on the setup at your organization, you may have an option for Teams or Skype. Don't choose the wrong one. And you can do this on mobile as well. In fact, the mobile experience is really good because similar to this, it's just a toggle and boom, it's there. You got it going from right there. And for scheduling a channel meeting, you just go into that channel, and then at the top, you can drop down arrow next to meet now and schedule that meeting. Channel meetings are interesting. If you haven't played around with them much, they work in certain ways in certain different systems, actually, depending on whether you work in enterprise or education, government, that kind of thing. But when you schedule a channel meeting, you'll see that meeting scheduled in the channel itself. The meeting invite comes from the team, not from the person that schedules it. So it's actually owned by the team, regardless of whether that person who schedules it leaves the team is really helpful. When you do create a channel meeting, be kind of wary, actually, because it's a little bit tricky. Go forward and make sure that you select the channel first and then choose the invitees, because especially if you're going to be creating a channel meeting through the calendar, which from there you can select channel as one of the options. And the reason for that is because when you select the channel, it clears the invitees because it thinks that you don't need invitees because you're in a channel. And the reason for that is because the concept of a channel meeting is not so much that you're inviting people, but that you're just telling everybody that there's a meeting. Now, if you're in the education space, everybody gets an invitation to that meeting. They want to make sure that the students are getting invited to those meetings and don't miss a class. But in the enterprise space, it's the opposite, unless your O365 administrator has turned a different toggle on. So generally speaking, most people, not all, and you might be different, most people don't get an invitation to a channel meeting. So that's really important to keep in mind. The attendees, if you're going to invite, have to be part of that team. And if you start trying to add people not in the team, it won't let you. But you can, in an existing channel meeting, you can forward the invitation that you have in, like, say, Outlook. And in this case, that person can be included, but they can't see the chat, they can't see the files, because all of those things exist in the channel, which require permissions. And then there's a limitation here is if you're using private channels, you cannot use, you cannot schedule a private or a meeting within a private channel. So something to keep in mind. So private channels are very cool. You just have to be aware of what you're kind of stepping into there, because they can become a little bit burdensome and somewhat confusing, especially for the new type of user. Another big one here is the meeting options. So if you open up an already scheduled meeting, you actually can't get into this until the meeting is scheduled. There's a button and you have to be the organizer to access this. There is a link called meeting options. One of the most useful things and most hidden things, best kept secrets in Teams. This is where you can change who can bypass the lobby, announcing people joining or leaving, and then who can present. So basically the meeting roles. Very, very important here. So make sure to do that beforehand. I think it's actually really important. You want to make sure if you're going to use the lobby, use it and make sure that it's set up correctly. Be aware, very aware of what meeting roles are. So before the meeting, in that meeting options, you can set the who can present. That's essentially the meeting role. So if you can present, you're called a presenter. If you cannot, you're an attendee. And then there's this one-off person that's called the organizer, the person that schedules it, who has sort of full control of everything always. And then during the meeting itself, you can actually click on the participant pane and make an attendee demote a presenter, or make a presenter promote an attendee. So you can actually let somebody be a presenter for a little while and then demote them in the case of maybe they're trustworthy enough for 5 minutes to share their screen about something, but not for the whole session. And we want to make sure they can't actually go off and break something when they shouldn't. Also, your meetings can have a dial-in number. Now, I'm one that absolutely hates this because you're losing almost all of the multimedia experience of Teams. You're not able to see any video. You're not able to see any shared screen. You lose complete context as to what anybody's talking about. Also, it costs money. I don't want to pay for that if I don't have to. But there is an option for somebody to call in for audio only, but just be aware that that's one of the sort of kickers there is you're going to have to make sure that you invest in that. This is on a per user per license basis, so you have to pay monthly for each person. So whenever I would send out, if I have this license, I would send out the invitation. My invitation would have the join now link at the button or bottom, and it would also say you can call this number. But the person that sits next to me in the cubicle nearby may not have that license, and therefore all of their meetings do not have that option. So you can't like hop it around between people and share it like a lot of people do right now with sort of conference call numbers where like an entire department shares it. So it's a nice kind of a way for Microsoft has made a little bit of money. I just got a question here. I can't access the meeting options after I schedule a meeting. My Teams is education. I'm not sure about that one. I would ask your IT administrator, unfortunately, because you should have that. Meeting options should always be available to the organizer, I would think. Okay, so now we've got the meeting scheduled. Now we want to join the meeting, right? Or sorry, we've got the meeting chosen and built out. So let's get into or join. Yeah, no, this is joining. See, I've got the slides mixed up here. So we can join from multiple different places, right? First off, join from Teams, right? Just join from Teams. Open up Teams and join from there. That's going to be the easiest experience for you. You can go into your calendar if you've been invited and click join. If it's a channel meeting, go in the channel and you'll see a little notification at the top of the experience where if somebody's already joined or started it, you can't miss it. You'll also have a little icon, video icon next to the channel itself and go from there. But you can also join from, say, like Outlook. And actually, this is another reason why Outlook on the web, I think, is better, because you don't see this experience on the desktop yet. So if you click on the join button for a meeting, it will automatically join in from Outlook through the browser, and it will launch Teams for you. Go in through the browser if you want to do it that way. Now, the join invitation in the email that you get is a standard. Like I mentioned earlier, you'd have that click here to join, and it will have the telephone number. Well, for some of you, this might be news, but you might be used to seeing the click here to join Teams meeting. That text is actually changing. So this is what the new standard text is going to say, and that's going to be happening within the next week and a half or so. Actually, the Microsoft accounts, if you ever meet with anybody from Microsoft, as of now, they're already using this new text. So this is how you join from any email address. It will say click here to join the meeting. I guess the join Microsoft Teams meeting was terminology was too confusing. They must have done some A/B testing over the last couple of years. And in addition to that, you can also join from a telephone. If you're joining from a smartphone, actually all you have to do is tap the number, and you don't have to type in the conference code ID. It will just go directly. That's why it looks weird, actually. You'll see the two commas. That's because it's getting you through the the phone tree to get there. So it's very handy to have that access. Now, when you're in a meeting and you want people to join, they can join whenever. If they already have the link or the invitation, they can kind of jump in whenever they want, but it's kind of nice to pull people in last minute if you need to. So pulling somebody in that's internal, just go into the people pane and there's a little box that says add people, start typing in a name and click. This will actually call that person. They will get a ring on Teams, on their desktop, potentially on their phone as well. This is a great way to be like, yo, you're missing. You need to be in here and get in here now. For all other cases, you can just copy the join info and then paste it. One quick tip about that, it does not copy a URL. It copies the literal join Microsoft Teams with all of the information, like basically that entire closeout signature thing that I just showed in the last slide. So it's not something that you want to like paste into a browser, unfortunately. But it is nice to be able to pull people in when you want to. Now, once we've joined, we want to play around a little bit while we're in the meeting. First off, it is so tempting because there's nobody here. It's just me. Nobody's watching me. Nobody's making sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I can turn my video off whenever I want to. And because of that, I can be multitasking. I have two screens in front of me. That's a lot of potential for distraction. So don't multitask. Be present, be engaged, be there. Otherwise, you're wasting other people's time. You're wasting your own time. And if you shouldn't be in the meeting, tell somebody that you shouldn't be in the meeting, right? Be an adult about it. So I think that's really the big one about this. The other is it's 2020. You're working from home, most likely. Turn your video on. Humans are social species. We don't just work with voice. We work with sight. We work with body language. We work with facial expressions, that kind of thing. A good portion of our ability to communicate is coming from what we see and not just what we hear. Also, knowing whether or not there is an awkward silence in a call, like a conference call, sometimes just comes down to whether or not you can, yes, exactly, I see that. It comes down to whether or not you can actually see that that person is actually doing something. So it's not so awkward when you know somebody's just looking something up. So turn your video on and be a member of the 21st century, please. As people join the meeting, this is one of those things I mentioned about the timekeeper. Mute new joiners if they don't come on muted beforehand. When you join a meeting and there's a lot of people on the call already, I don't know what the threshold is, it's probably 5 or 6, it's definitely low. Teams will automatically turn your sound off. Some people turn it back on anyway, and they may have sounds in the background. Their baby's running around, their dog's, whimpering to go out, whatever. You can mute that participant. Go into the participants pane and you can mute the participant. I think it's super handy to do that. And that kind of just brings me to one of my biggest pet peeves in the entire Teams experience is if you're not talking, stay on mute. And there are a lot of debates about this because you want to be able to have a productive conversation and not to press the button all the time. Well, my view on that is if you're having a brainstorm between 10 people and there's an issue with sound coming in behind you, that's a pretty intimate situation. One of those people will tell you, hey, Matt, there's something behind you, your microphone is scratching up against your shirt if you have, like a lapel or something like that, or, your headset is scratching. They would tell you that. But if I'm in a situation where I'm presenting to 150 people, my sound better be good and I better turn it off if it isn't when I'm not presenting or when I'm not talking. And I think that's really important because I'm the only person in this meeting right now that can't hear the background noise behind me. So if my cat gets overambitious and starts scratching on the door behind me, I'll hear that and I'll know that I can press mute on Teams. And it's no longer the case, except for today, because for whatever reason, Teams bumped me back to the older meeting experience. I don't have to do that hover thing to get the mute button up. We now have the toolbar where the buttons are ever present, which is really good. So mute is a really important thing to me. I have been screaming my head off at the Teams team to give us a push to talk feature where you just press space and talk and then let go. And I have not gotten through to them yet on that one, but I'm really pushing hard on that. Okay, another thing is background blur. If this is what it takes to get you on video, great. If you're embarrassed about what's behind you, just replace what's behind you, right? When you join the meeting, you have the option to replace your background with either blur or a custom image. People have plenty of fun with those custom images. Just be appropriate to the organization that you work in. If you work in a school, great, put cartoon stuff behind you. Sitting in front of the Simpsons background during a reasonably important sales meeting is probably not your best bet. But yeah, I would say, keep that in mind. And then I think actually one of the most useful things is the chat. So for me right now, I'm actually following the chat. I can see the meeting on my first monitor here. I have a second monitor, which is the one that I'm sharing. So I can track the meeting at the same time as I'm talking. Not that I'm saying it's super easy, because as I'm giving a presentation and trying to read it at the same time can be a little bit difficult, but it's definitely doable. But yeah, definitely use the chat to keep up on what people are doing. And when you're in the meeting, chat in there to keep up with other people, so that it's not just so people can share information. They can be like, hey, here's the link to that thing that that person was talking about, or if it's a way to not interrupt the meeting but still share information so others are able to see what's going on and understand what they should be doing. And then sharing content is a huge one. I think this keeps everybody on the same page, both figuratively and literally. And if you're not, even in the world of co-authoring, if you're all working on the same Word document at the same time, I think it still makes sense to present that Word document so that the person presenting or the person like leading the discussion can show everybody where they are. So even if that another person in the discussion is working on the Word doc 2 pages down, that's fine. They can still see where the presenter was working from. I will say I actually hate the PowerPoint share mode in Teams. One, because by default, it lets people bounce around on the slides before I want them to. I guess they can go backwards, they can't go forwards. But there are a lot of other ways to share PowerPoint slides. In fact, the way that I'm sharing right now is with PowerPoint slides in a window. In fact, I can show you real quick if I slide over here, another copy of this presentation. If you've never done this before, if you go into PowerPoint, I realize this is Mac, but it works the same way on Windows. In the slideshow tab, you click Set up Slideshow. Under Show Type, if you click Browse by an individual and click OK, if I click Launch, you can see that this is now in its own window. I can resize it, I can move it around, I can click to move forward, I can even close it if I want to, and if I press Escape, it brings me back to my slides as they were. So this lets me actually show my slideshow here without it taking over my whole screen, all right, which is really, really handy. And what I'm doing over here is actually bringing content in 2 different places. So you actually see a webcam feed of me plus content. So on the left side of my screen is my PowerPoint slides in that window mode. Plus, in this case, I'm using QuickTime, showing my webcam. You can use on Windows, the Windows 10 camera app, which a lot of people don't like because it has a lot of buttons in Chrome visible, but you could always use like VLC player. So I can actually present my face and my content at the same time, which is actually very useful because I can now control what you see, which is something that you can't do in Teams, and you won't even be able to do in Teams once that new dynamic view and what is it, controlled content or whatever it is comes out within the next few months, because in that case, that's still dependent on the user choosing what they want to see. In this case, I choose what I want you to see. So it's almost like I have the benefits of a live event without that. So very cool in that respect. When you share a web page, if you think it's big enough, it's not. Zoom in, keep zooming in, keep zooming in. And when it comes to keeping a history of the meeting, press record. You will get transcripts and you will get a nice recording of the video. If you haven't heard, these videos are now going to be stored within SharePoint and OneDrive. It's a little bit tricky as to how that works. You might want to look into that because it's coming whether you like it or not, but you can opt in as of this week. So consider that if you would like to. As people join the meeting, if you have the lobby enabled, you'll have to admit them. This gets incredibly annoying during the meeting, especially if they're being announced. You can actually change the meeting settings mid-lob or the lobby settings mid-meeting. So that timekeeper person, let's say you want to just have the lobby as a place to keep people until you start the meeting, and then after that you don't care. The person or the organizer can jump into the meeting and actually set it so that the lobby is no longer a requirement, save, and then everybody who joins after that no longer pops up and says, you know, I'm trying to get in. So I think that's really handy. I also look at this as the opportunity when you first start as a presenter, mute everybody. There's a mute all button, just mute everybody and then go. And then everybody that joins after that, if they have a mute issue, so be it. But that kind of starts you on a clean slate. You can actually follow, if you don't have the 2 screens set up like I have here, you can actually follow the meeting chat on your phone or on a tablet or other mobile device. So just open up the meeting on your phone, and instead of transferring it, use or add this device so you can join the meeting twice, and then you can be in the meeting. And then keep an eye on raised hands. So if people have questions, they can use the raised hand button, and you'll see that within the participant pane. And then live captions are going to be super handy for accessibility, hard of hearing, or anybody actually who happens to be like maybe in a public space or has loud voice behind them or loud sound behind them. It's pretty accurate. I actually like it a lot. And then some meetings or some tips for attendees specifically. Don't admit people from the lobby, even though you can. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should. And you should definitely try to follow the raise hand, but that's something that you need to kind of set the expectations at the beginning of the meeting. The meeting facilitator is in charge of that. They need to say, we're going to be using the raise hand feature and kind of move forward with that. And if the meeting presenter is not zooming in, the attendee can zoom in, actually, believe it or not. So from their perspective, they can actually make things bigger depending on the content that's being shared. And then if you're on the go and you want into the car and then you're driving someplace else, you can join the meeting from your phone, choose transfer to this device, and it'll move it from the desktop to the phone. It is super slick, very smooth, and I'm a very big fan of it. So that is the kind of full life cycle of the meeting content itself. Eventually, you're going to have to wrap it up and end that meeting. The biggest thing is going to be those action items. You know, figure out what those people are that or what the tasks were that were being assigned to people. Again, the task, the person, the due date. Those are the big things you absolutely have to have written down. Make sure people are held accountable. If you have the opportunity and the meeting isn't too big for it to be annoying, try to schedule any follow-up meetings with everybody in the room, because it's a lot easier to do this in person or even over an online meeting than it is trying to use even Find Time. Because even with Find Time, you still have to go chase people down sometimes. Sometimes it just comes down to, hey, you're here and you can't leave me until I get a date out of you, so please give me a date. If you're not aware, you can end the meeting or you can leave the meeting. If you're the organizer, you have both options. If you're an attendee or a presenter, you can only just leave. If you leave the meeting keeps going. If you're the presenter or the organizer, you can end the meeting. That means everybody's booted out of the meeting. And that means the recording stops if there is a recording. So generally, if you're the organizer, end the meeting unless there's some sort of ongoing chatter that's productive and should be going on. And the meeting recording, if you did make one, share that with people, especially if they're external folks. It used to be, or it kind of still is, that you would have to sort of download the file from Stream and then upload it to OneDrive and then share the link. Now those files can be stored directly in OneDrive or SharePoint, and now you can share externally. They're not being viewed through the Stream experience any longer. It's just an MP4 file that you're going to find directly in the as a file, basically just another one in OneDrive or SharePoint. The nice thing, though, about the Teams meeting afterwards is the chat. The chat is available to you, which is a great way to keep up with people in a central place without having to go via email, because sometimes external chat is a really difficult thing to do in Teams. Even when it should work, I've found that it's almost like a 50-50, it doesn't work. So that chat is really, really valuable. So you could provide people links to files, upload new files even if you want to, provide the link to the meeting recording afterwards, just so that external people have access to that one when the one that was automatically generated doesn't work for those external people. And you can provide follow-up updates or things like that. That chat can last for a while. But if you're annoyed by it and you want to hear nothing else about it, just go into the chat itself, click that ellipsis, and you can either mute it or you can hide it so that you no longer have to see it or hear from it. And then coming soon, just announced at Ignite, is this concept of the new meeting recap experience. The meetings themselves are sort of getting an experience now where they almost look like their own little team within a meeting. You'll see that there's a bunch of different tabs on here. So it has its chat, details, files, meeting notes, recording and transcripts, and any other apps that were added to that meeting, which means that all this stuff is now centralized in a really nice spot and just looks really good. So I don't have to go jumping around for all the stuff that happened with, popped up within the meeting itself. So wrapping up today, I'm gonna jump right back to the whole concept of, meetings in general, but online meetings especially are just not natural experiences for human beings. And we have a lot of work to do. And a lot of us were brought into this new world, not expecting it, not wanting it. And we are now sort of forced to do it. And I think it really requires some simplicity and some general guidance that doesn't, require a PhD to understand. And, we may not necessarily make it to the nirvana of awesome online meetings. There will still be awkward silence. There will still be views up nostrils that we don't necessarily appreciate. But we can aim for better, because now's the time to do it. People are still new to this, to these new experiences, and grab them when they're new, and don't let bad behaviors or poor education or not enough training fester and cause cultural rifts essentially within an organization. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for having me today. A reminder real quick is the ebook is available again for free. You can get it in the web version if you want to. Again, add that as a tab in your channel and Teams if you'd like. There's also a download that you can get. So you can share it a little bit more easily if you prefer. And if you like that, I actually have a book coming out reasonably soon. If you'd like to pre-order it, it's going to be very step-by-step. It's not just going to be meetings. It's going to be the entire Teams experience, a lot of screenshots, best practices, tips, tricks, all that kind of stuff. Really hoping that people will like it and kind of can build off of some of the concepts that we've looked at in this session and others that I've been giving. Probably the most important slide for all of you here is going to be resources, things that I think are going to be the most useful for you. These slides you can find, you can get from the Teams Fest itself, but I'll have this link that jum.2/Matt presents. These are all case sensitive. That's where you can get these slides. I'll post it a little bit or in another slide as well. And then the ebook for this session, another ebook for just general Teams etiquette. So that'd be channels, conversation, chat, all that kind of stuff. A Teams intro training that I've done on YouTube, 18 minutes long, overview of the entire application. If you want to give people your organization and put that in as like a required training, it's not going to be specific to your organization, but it should be reasonably good overall. And just a bunch of other stuff that you might want to look at. So I'm going to open it up for questions now. Again, the handout, the slides here are available at that link in that blue box. So go ahead and type that in. Actually, I'll just put that in the chat real quick. And if anybody has questions, feel free to to drop them right in the chat. Interested in seeing 100 yeah, 100 plus people in together mode would be pretty cool. No, I don't think I have the access to play with. Let's see. Okay. So I just set it up so you all can unmute. So if anybody wants to jump into and ask a question, you can feel free to do so. And I'll jump into the chat quick.
Matt, I have a question about the custom layout.
Yeah, sure.
I may have misread, but I thought that my interpretation was that dynamic view would be something that attendees could organize on their own to have their own personalized view, whereas the custom layout will be something that a presenter could organize that everyone would see it that way. Is that your understanding?
So the custom layout is going to be, I think it is, I think what you're saying is accurate. I think that there's still going to be, it's still not going to give us the sort of expectation that we probably want. Like for now, I don't know if anybody's played with the spotlight concept yet. Actually, if you're interested, John Moore just put out a really great video comparing spotlight to pinning in meetings yesterday. And I think it's going to be similar to that, where you can force the spotlight, but to everybody, but everybody can still, like minimize sort of like I can pin 10 people around the spotlight, which then makes the spotlight go from this to this, right? So I can't really force that. But when I'm sharing my screen like this, you're either seeing the share or you're seeing everything in the meeting, right? You're kind of going back and forth. And that's sort of, I like the way that I can force like it's the whole thing. I don't know. So you're right. I think it does come down to those people, or the custom layout does have some force in there, but I think it's going to be a little bit more castrated than we're hoping. And let me just check. I did see hands, and I like the fact that we're using hands. Iris.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good.
Good. I just have a question. So sometimes classrooms for teachers with Microsoft Teams, and one of the things that I get a lot is to set up breakout rooms. So what we were doing was we were setting up a meeting that was recurring, that would run all day. And then we would kind of shorten that link and then have that as a link that you could pop into all the time. do you suggest a better way? Because what was happening then was our calendar was kind of filling up with meetings. Is there a better way to do this?
So what was the downside to that? So you had one ongoing meeting like the whole time?
Yeah.
And the breakout rooms, what, you were stuck with them being reused? You had to like reorganize them, or?
No, they were just on the calendar, maybe on the phone. All I could see was just meetings all day, even though they seemed to be being pinned to the top in the calendar, because I picked the all day option. So that seemed to
I see.
Calendar. So when I go to my calendar page, it's just full of meetings.
I see. Okay, so I would say in that situation, you have a couple options. One, make the meetings when they actually are. But there's also really no reason to make it an all day, because the link is active for whenever you want it to be.
Okay.
Right. But beware, because once you start a meeting, the meeting can only last for, I believe it's 24 hours. So if somebody starts it and it keeps going for 24 hours and 2 minutes, it's going to stop at the 24-hour mark.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I was setting the all day option. So we only had to create maybe like 4 breakout rooms. And what we did then, copied and pasted the link and used the shortening. And then what we did was, when we were in the main room, in the main meeting, we would just actually paste these links in as a breakout room 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the students would just pop into them. So the issue really is, it's the amount of space it was taking up in the calendar.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Gotcha. So when you say breakout rooms, you're talking about like channel meetings.
Yeah. So just
okay. Just so everybody understands, a breakout room, and I don't mean this in like a pejorative way. So she's using channel meetings when it comes to like the terminology. The education space loves to use the term breakout room for a channel meeting because that's like a breakout space for the students. It's not a breakout room in the perspective of what Teams calls a breakout room, which is the concept only in a meeting that already is ongoing. But yeah, I would say either break up those meetings and just make them what they are, or you could actually just, send a link and say, hey, everybody in a chat, here's the link, just join. That's a nice thing about those meetings, is that link is always available to you and you kind of do whatever you want. I am actually really sorry about the QR code. I think I have tried this QR code instead for the feedback. I apologize for that. I'm not sure why the other QR code wasn't working. Okay, let me take a look at, I know Karen Turner, I think, was the next one who had a question.
Yeah, Matt, thank you. Can you hear me, Matt?
I can, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I get a problem sometimes. I'm running classes, kind of globally on all sorts of topics, and I get a few people who can't resolve the meeting invite. And sometimes it happens to me too. I've set up the meeting and I've usually set it up inside Teams calendar. I've tried it the other way through Outlook calendar, and it won't let me in. It says it's waiting for someone to let me in. You heard of that?
I haven't had that happen to myself. I will say I'm not much of a tech support guy. My best use of my brain is for setting things up, not for supporting them. But I would definitely either talk to your IT person if you're not that person, or definitely put a ticket in with the Microsoft person and say, we pay really good money for this. You better fix it yesterday.
Fantastic.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, let me take a look at the chat real quick. Any tips on how to smoothly switch between multiple applications shared, for example, from presentations to demo, RDP, and back? So sharing options in Teams, I don't think are the most beautiful thing or the most smooth thing in the world. For me, when I share, you saw me kind of slide or swipe between what are virtual desktops. Again, this is on Mac, but Windows supports it as well. If I actually hover, you can actually see the 2 different desktops up here. I like to have any app that I possibly can open already within a virtual desktop, so I can just swipe between them is my best bet. If you're scared of sharing a whole screen, especially if you only use one monitor, which honestly, if you're working from one place at this point and you're not working in an office any longer, either steal the monitor from where you used to work or borrow it, or buy one yourself. They're $100. You can get a reasonable monitor for $100 online these days. And it's just worth the investment. It just makes it just a totally different experience. But I also try to use the web app version. So if I have a browser open, so let's say I have Chrome open, I can just window share the Chrome browser and then have all those apps open up in different tabs. It's not going to be perfect, but it does give you an option so that you're trying to keep, which I think can potentially help out. All right, let's jump back into hand raise here. All right, so John Yang, you have a question?
Hi, yeah, I do. I just wondered if you have any advice on when we know the new features are coming out. I keep hearing about new features such as the breakout rooms you mentioned a minute ago, but all I hear is they're coming out sometime in October, November, or this quarter,
Yeah.
and then I never know exactly when I can tell our user community this will be there, in the next couple of days, for example. Is there a way
Yes.
to find out?
So there's no perfect way. Let me give you a link. So I recently put out a blog post, and I'm just trying to get the short link here. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to post this link into the chat, and this is my stay up to date live. So if I open this up and I make it a little prettier and make it full screen. So what I have here are like 9 sources to follow. And there's a video overview of this too. If you are an admin, you have access to some more information, which I absolutely think is the most non-democratic thing in the world. It's absolutely awful. And I think Microsoft should be ashamed of themselves that some of the most important information that we have that's available is not available to anybody in an organization outside of like 1 to 6 people. It's insane. But that's the admin message center. So if you are an IT admin, you should know that this exists. You're going to get emails on a regular basis of changes. Whether or not that IT admin forwards that information to you, which they should, is going to be a different story. You can also be turned on to targeted release. Your IT admin can do that. That gives you early access to certain features. I don't believe Teams is included in that anymore. But that would be like for when Microsoft Lists came out, I think I got that like a month early. And that can be something that the system or the IT admin sets up for the whole organization or for an individual. Now, of course, if you're in an organization of 10,000 people, the last thing that person wants is to get a one-off request for, hey, can you make me a targeted release user? And you just say, I got business needs. Like I need to be able to test this stuff out to make sure it works. I will say probably the most useful thing though, because it is publicly available, click or open up or follow, I should say, this MSFT365 status on Twitter. This isn't so much for new features coming. This is for when Teams, Office 365, M365, whatever, is down. So a couple weeks ago, M365 was down. It became very notable. And this is by far one of the best resources. In fact, they usually post here before they post on the admin center. And I think it just comes down to the human incentive of, oh man, I don't want to admit that our, something broke or whatever else. It is sometimes posted in sort of tech speak. So if you look at this, we've received reports of users experiencing issues with accessing their Exchange Online accounts via Outlook on the web. Our initial investigation, blah, blah, blah. Exchange Online just means Outlook, right? That is tech speak for email. But they will reference Teams. They will reference SharePoint Online. They will reference OneDrive. This is this is one of 2 Twitter accounts that I actually get push notifications on my my phone. The other one is the Twitter safety, just to find out when Donald Trump gets leashed up a little bit once in a while. But the other thing is the tech community for the blogs. And then I know people hate Twitter for the vitriol and the, I don't know, just the overall hate and spew, but you don't have to follow politics, is the people that I generally follow on Twitter. There's a lot of good people that you can follow and you can kind of keep in contact with them and see what they're doing. If you want to know what happened at Ignite, for example, like I just recently put a video out on Ignite announcements. So once this loads up, if you go here and you click on this Ignite recap, it's a 15-minute video, gives you all the big overview things on Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft Stream, the video service, Microsoft Search, and Yammer. So if you're interested in taking a look at that, by all means, I do post things, but I'm not making it out like I'm the BBC of the, I might post something useful, but if I don't hold it against me, kind of thing. So there's no really good answer, but that might get you, might get you started.